Okay. Yeah. I think in multiple. I'm glad I was writing names and I didn't catch my past it. James. But didn't miss any of the clergy. I think I got you all. This year, so I could put my mic to my wireless. Take it up. So they don't know. They don't want to come to me. Yeah. Testing. You don't even got to say it right there. You got it? Yes, sir. Testing 1, 2. You good. All right. Appreciate it. We got all the media ready. Get ready. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Let me thank you all for attending today's press conference. I'd like to say thank you to Honorable Carl Snowden, convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders. We thank you for your leadership and orchestrating this critical press conference today. I am grateful for the Emmett Till Alert, which informed us about the potential threat against our community. I'd like to take this time to acknowledge all of the clergy who worked alongside with myself and Carl from the United Black Clergy of Anne Arundel County and South Baltimore, and also on the Eastern Shore. Today we have with us Apostle Larry Lee Thomas, the Executive Director of the UBC, Apostle Philip Duncan, Reverend Marguerite Morris, Apostle Abraham Shanklin, Elder Randy Curtis Jr., Dr. Barbara Palmer, Pastor Dante Duckett, and also Elder Charles James. We appreciate your presence, showing that we are a unified front, especially as it pertains to our communities. I am Apostle Antonio Palmer, the president of the United Black Clergy of Anne Arundel County. As a recent victim of 2 hate crime incidents against my church, Kingdom Celebration Center, this press conference that's sounding the alarm against domestic threats is very important to me. We know by firsthand evidence that there are still people and hate groups who are filled with hatred against certain ethnic groups and religious groups. If they have their way, they will commit heinous acts of violence against humanity. So when we receive potential threats against our community, our churches, our child care centers, we must take it seriously. We cannot allow these threats to go unaddressed. In 2020 alone, according to usafacts.org, there were 10,299 reported hate crime incidents across our nation. According to the FBI, hate crime targeting Black people has increased nearly 40% since 2019. And according to Pew Research Center, 20,084 instances of anti-Black crimes were reported over the last decade. As we see from these statistics, things are not getting better. The shooting in Buffalo that killed 10 people and wounded several others was no accident. The shooting at Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina was no accident. Let us be proactive against hatred and racial acts of violence. Racism is a public health crisis, and hate crimes are the fruit of this crisis. As an owner of an African American owned child care center, I'm concerned about the recent threat against Black child care centers made by domestic terrorist groups. I'm calling on our local, state, and federal government officials and agencies to respond to and address these recent threats. So again, thank you to Carl and to everyone who have come together to address this issue. I want to, at this particular time, bring to the podium Sergeant Jimmy Spearman of Annapolis Police Department.
Good afternoon, all. This is a historic event, and I'm glad that each and every one of you are here to support it. We as citizens are taking a proactive stance in protecting our children, and also in memory and honor of the children that we have already lost due to violence of all sorts. So we're putting together this app, and we're hoping to be able to have everyone be diligent in supporting and protecting our children as we continue to go through these heightened times of violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Spearman, for your advocacy. Next, we will have Dr. Paul Dyer, who's also a former Special Forces.
Thank you guys for coming. I want to talk about the mental health issue that threats have against all people. Violence is also verbal and does affect the community. It affects the emotions, and we cannot live in fear and desperate times. We have to pull together as a human race. So it affects us on all levels, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So I want us to be proactively to stop us affecting ourselves in an emotional manner where we act emotionally and we act out of proper and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. And we appreciate your work and your efforts as you tackle mental health issues in our community. Next, we're going to have my lovely wife, the doctor herself, Dr. Barbara Palmer, the owner of Kingdom Care Childcare Center, where we stand today.
Thank you and good afternoon. As my husband said, my name is Dr. Barbara Palmer. I'm the owner of Kingdom Care Childcare Center, located right here in Odenton, Maryland. As an African American owner of a nationally accredited early learning center, our focus is to nurture children in a safe and secure environment. Our responsibility is to ensure that all families who enter our facility, their children, our staff, and our volunteers feel safe. We want to make sure we are proactive and not reactive, waiting for an incident to happen to put measures in place when it comes to our children. Thailand was an example to all early learning centers that we need to take extra steps to not only secure our facilities, but to protect our children, our staff, and our families as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. And as she mentioned, Thailand, there were 22 children who was killed in that heinous incident. And so we want to make sure we protect our children here at Kingdom Care Child Care Center, and all of the child care centers across this nation. Next, we will also have an owner of the child care center. He is my dear friend, Apostle Abraham Shanklin, the owner of New Life Child Care.
Thank you. Honorable Snowden, and to everybody gathered, I was once asked the question, why does racism seem to flourish continually through every generation? My response has been because of the deception with regards to us, where the blade is applied to the tree of racism. When we turned away, we didn't realize the blade was not applied to the root that would get rid of racism, but it was applied to the branches. And everybody know that when you prune branches, it makes the tree grow back even stronger and bigger. And that's the reason why racism continued to flourish in such a massive way. And as an owner and operator of a child care center, New Life Child Care Center and primary school in West Anne Arundel County in Hanover, we will continue to operate at a continued level of excellence and vigilance in every aspect of our operations. We are committed to remaining resolved through any threats from the dark web, or any web for that matter, to anything that will stand against or jeopardize our way of living and the protection of our children and our families that are in our care. Make no mistake, we're not here because we're in panic mode. Make no mistake that as business owners and as leaders and faith leaders, we hold true to cooperate with every other business in our community and to hold true to our values to love our neighbors, even if that requires prayer, protest, and protection. We are not here in panic mode. We are here as a sign of strength. Silent no more.
Thank you, Apostle, and thank you for all of the tremendous work that you do here in Anne Arundel County. Next, we're going to hear from a member of the Caucus of African American Leaders, who also helped organize this press conference today. He is the Professor Robert Johnson.
Thank you all for attending today. I want you all to make no mistake about this. This is based on a credible threat with information that leads us to believe that there may be planned, coordinated attacks against Black daycare centers across the United States. We need to make certain that, as we have done through this Emmett Till Alert system, that we sound the alarm, not only in our community, but throughout the country. That no longer will we live in fear. No longer is it acceptable to terrorize a community. No longer should domestic terrorism be allowed to flourish in these United States of America. We need to call it out as it happens. We need to ensure that our local, state, and government officials, federal officials, take action, right? Our alert system is to advise individuals to be vigilant, to be safe, to be cautious, and to protect these young children and allow them to flourish and allow them to blossom to adulthood. We can no longer sit by idly. I'm asking all of you within the community to take this threat seriously. Share it with members in your network. Share it with members within your family. and protect them as you would protect your household. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Johnson. We appreciate you lending a voice of advocacy towards all of our community efforts and making sure that we have a brighter future, especially for our children. Uh, Lastly, we will hear from uh, the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders, the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders. He is the Honorable Carl O. Snowden.
Let me thank Apostle and the clergy and try to make sure we put this in perspective, especially in live streaming, so that people watching and want to make sure that people understand that this is a serious threat. We need to put it in the context of the times in which we're living. Apostle mentioned that there were the murder of 9 African American people at a church in South Carolina. Those responsible for that killing had hoped that it would spark a race war. They made no mistake about it. On the dark web, there is a real effort to create race war, a civil war. They've said it publicly and they've advocated it. We saw just this summer, as pointed out, in Buffalo, New York, African American people just shopping on a Saturday, being murdered. Those responsible for it, that murder, is as a result of those killings, were white supremacists. The gentleman in South Carolina declared that his intent was to do maximum damage. The person who was responsible for the killing in Buffalo, New York, planned it. Very careful, very deliberate. In both instances, they had expected the response from the African American community to be different than what it was. They thought if you went into a black church and killed black people would be on the streets. They thought if you saw black people being murdered at a grocery store, it would create such a reaction in the black community that they would be in the streets. So now they've planned a coordinated attack. Their belief is if they were able to carry out successfully this coordinated attack, where 10 to 12 African American daycare centers would be dynamited or blowing up, that black people would respond to that. And so part of this press conference is to let our people know that the intention is to create wanton violence in reaction to this. 2 is to put on alert to our federal authorities that they have both a legal and a moral responsibility to protect their citizens. It was Christopher Wray, who said, he's the FBI director, that the greatest threat to domestic tranquility, he said, is white supremacy. Our question is, what are you doing about it? What specifically is the FBI, government intelligence agencies, local law enforcement agency doing to address this particular threat? Before coming here, I got 2 calls that I want to share with the public. One was from a special agent in the FBI who shared with me that they're aware of the threat, that they wanted to know what our source was for this threat, which groups could we specifically identify. And of course, we are well aware that the FBI, Homeland Security, they monitor the same dark web that we monitor. So we know that they're aware of where these are coming from. The second call came from Major Catherine Goodwin. She's with the Anne Arundel County Police Department, and she offered some very specific recommendations that I want to make sure that I share with those who are viewing, who may be the owners of daycare centers. They have and are willing to come in and do an assessment of each daycare center to make specific recommendations to what they believe can be done to improve the particular daycare center. So we call on the community to take advantage of that. Please do have the Anne Arundel County Police Department, if you live in Anne Arundel County, do this assessment in terms of your particular business. Then there's a second thing that we think everybody should consider doing in terms of the daycare. It's pretty inexpensive to do these, I guess they call them ring cameras, where you can install them in your business or at your home. Um, Believe it or not, they are very effective. Those particular that particular device is the reason why um, the person who was arrested for vandalizing the Kingdom Church was apprehended. Now, here's what I want people to hear loud and clear. When they were apprehended, this particular individual, he was of no fixed address. He had a criminal record that showed that he had indeed been involved in criminal activity. And to the chagrin and amazement of a lot of people, he was allowed to be released on his own personal recognizance, which suggests to us that they did not take hate crimes seriously, given the fact that the purpose of giving someone a bail is to ensure that they show up in court. His trial is scheduled for next month. We're going to monitor that trial very closely locally to make sure that justice prevailed there. I conclude with these remarks. Martin Luther King Jr. once made the observation that when it comes to violence, it is not the solution to the problems. And as these white supremacists are advocating violence, they really believe that if they can create such havoc in our communities, that we will have a violent response. The fact of the matter is we're going to have a strategic response. We're going to protect our children and our grandchildren. We're going to make sure that the pastors who are standing with us are not going to be doing eulogies 3 months from now, but they're going to be praising the leadership in the community that will prevent the violence. If by putting out this alert, we save one life, it's worth it. If we put the FBI and others were concerned that we're putting on notice terrorists that we are aware of their activity. And we want them to be aware that we are aware of their activity because we do not want to, in the words of one of the previous speakers, to be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to take the steps necessary to prevent the loss of life. So again, on behalf of a grateful community, we thank those who've been involved in monitoring the dark web. We'll continue to do that. And the Emmett Till Alert, which was set up specifically for the purpose of letting people know when we think that there is a credible threat. And clearly, we believe this is a credible threat. If there's any questions from the media, either I or Apostle or others will be happy to answer.
I have a question. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi, Mr. Jordan. How are you?
Fine.
I wanted to. I was going to ask, since I'm not on the dark web, making it much. Can you give us any more information about this specific threat? And I believe this is the first activation of the network, other than when you first started.
That's correct.
It. So what? So it's new to all of us. So what are the bars that you've set? And then once you've decided it's worthy of, or an alert is warranted, how do you decide if it's 1, 2, or 3? And in terms of this, because as somebody said, you don't want people to be in panic mode and shutting down their daycare centers. So can you give us a little bit more background on this?
Well, there are two things that, since you say you're not aware of the dark web.
Well, I'm aware of it. I just don't frequent it.
Really would be helpful if the media would monitor the dark web, because out of the dark web, you kind of can see what the trends are in the country. And one of the trends that are going on now, there's been an increase, if you monitor the web, an increase on white supremacists calling for a race war. Sometimes they use the term civil war, but behind both is the whole issue of race. So we've got men and women who have backgrounds in law enforcement. Some are military background. We have a gentleman on this morning who met with us, who has a real extensive background in terms of the military. So what we do is when we receive threats, we have a small group of people whose job it is to vet the threats. We've had previous threats. It's not the first time we've received a threat. We've received earlier threats, and it was vetted by this small group of people who decided that it was not of a nature that it should be put on the alert. The degree of how and what the degree is as it relates to the severity, the reason this one came out with a severe, the highest we can, because it involves potentially people's lives. So we wanted to make sure that people take it seriously, that they understand that there are people who are willing to kill people. If you can think of it this way, if somebody's willing to kill people while they're praying, they will kill children while they're playing. And we know that. And we've seen this before. And so for those who ask, should we take it seriously? The response is New York. The response is South Carolina. The response is the history of violence in the country. More should have been done to protect Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. It was not. Malcolm X, it was not. Medgar Evers, it was not. Fred Hampton, it was not. And the lessons we learned from those unfortunate assassinations, many committed by people who are racist, is that we need to be proactive, protect our leadership. And lastly, I wanted you to be aware of this. That alert went to every member of the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus, which includes the Speaker of the House, and to every major civil rights organization here in the state of Maryland. And of course, it went to clergy and other people, because we want them to inform their constituents, members of their church, and members of the community of this threat, so that we will not be standing here grieving because innocent children lost their lives.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so very much. Thanks.
Thank you. And that concludes our press conference. Thank you guys for attending.
Thank you.